Hello everyone and welcome to Kiki Crochet. In this video tutorial we're going to learn how to crochet step by step a corner to corner blanket using Alize Puffy Fine Ombre Batik. For this yarn you do not need to know how to crochet or knit, although I do use a crochet hook throughout the video just to make sure you're able to see correctly the steps that I'm doing, but you do not have to know how to crochet or knit. At this point I want to mention that I'm very happy because this is the first time this design is coming out. I'm the first one to post a video on how to work a corner to corner blanket with this type of yarn, and it's not difficult. The only difficult part was that I had to spend a couple of hours to make sure that I'm working the decreases correctly, because if you do not work the decreases correctly, your corners are going to shrink. So this is a part of the video that I do want you to pay close attention to. Okay, I used two skeins of this yarn. We're going to see in a little bit the yarn. I used a total of two skeins, and out of the second skein I used just a little bit, so we have a lot of yarn left to work other projects as well. This is a crib size blanket, so this is 100 centimeters wide and 120 centimeters long. Now before we start to see how to create this blanket, I want to show you how to attach the new yarn, because while I was working the blanket I didn't have enough time, so I did it off camera, the attaching of the new yarn and the completion of the blanket. So I do want to show firstly how to attach new yarn if you'll need to do it, and then we're going to see the type of yarn that I'm using and how to start to create the corner to corner blanket. Before we start, let's see the material that we're going to use. I'm using the Puffy Fine yarn by Alize, and I'm using the line Ombre Batik, and this is because as you go through the yarn it gets lighter. Now this yarn, you do not need to have any skills in crocheting or knitting. You can see it over here, no needles, no hooks collection. The only thing that you need to use is your fingers to take the loops the one through the other. Now this is the first time that you'll ever see on YouTube and on any pattern the pattern worked from corner to corner. It's my pattern and you only find it on Kiki Crochet. Okay, it's the first time ever that someone crochets this yarn from corner to corner. It's very easy. The only thing that you need to pay attention is the first rows, because they can get a little tricky, but then as you go through the next rows it gets very easy and simple. What I'm going to do is I'm going to be using a crochet hook only because I want you to be able to see how I'm taking through the loops through each other, okay? Because if I'm using my fingers you won't be able to see what I'm doing. Now each skein is 17.63 ounces and 79.8 yards, and I'm going to crochet a crib size blanket, and I should be able to get the whole blanket with one skein. Now let's open up our yarn so we can start. Okay, so the beginning is right here where the little tail is at. Let me zoom in so you can see easier what I'm doing. Now what we need to do, as we do on the regular corner to corner blankets, we need to start with the corner and start increasing on both sides so we can get a triangle, and then we're going to start decreasing for the blanket to start closing up. So this is my first loop over here, and be careful because the loops are held by little cotton yarn over here. Make sure you do not pull this loop because it's going to close up, see? But if you do, that's okay. Start with the next one. So this is the first loop, and I want to grab the next two loops and take them through the first loop over here. So one, next loop, two. So I took the next two loops through the first one. So this is my first increase, and this will be the corner of the blanket. Now I have two loops And as we do on the corner to corner blankets, I need an increase in the beginning of the row and an increase in the end of the row. So I'm going to turn my work so the yarn is on the right side, and this is the first loop and this is the second loop. I'm going to take my crochet hook. You do not need a crochet hook to do this, but I'm doing it so you can see easier the steps that I'm doing. Okay, make sure you're not skipping any loops from the yarn. It's very easy to skip loops, so be aware and be careful as you're knitting through the loops. Grab the first loop from the yarn and the second loop as well, and take those two loops through the first one from your blanket. Now put your hook in the last loop from your blanket and grab the next two loops from the yarn. Okay, through the loop in your blanket and grab the next two loops from your yarn and take them through the loop of your blanket. So now I have a total of 4 loops, and I'm going to turn my work. So I want to work an increase in the first loop, one loop in each of the next two, and an increase in the last loop. So in this row, I have 1, 2, 3, 4 loops. And in the new row, I'm going to come up with a total of 6 loops. So this is the first loop from your blanket, and this is, I want to grab the next 2 loops from the yarn. Okay, so make sure you're not missing out any loops. So grab the first and second loop from the yarn and take them through the first loop of your blanket. Now I want to grab 1 loop in each of the next 2 loops of the blanket. So put your hook in the next loop of the blanket and grab the next loop from the yarn and take it through. Put your hook in the next loop of your blanket and grab the next loop from the yarn, and then in the last loop of your blanket, grab the next 2 loops from your yarn to work an increase. So grab the 2 loops from the yarn and take them through the loop of your blanket. So this is how our project looks like at this point, and we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 loops. If you're afraid that you're going to lose your loops and that you're not going to be able to find the first and the last one, please use stitch markers, okay? So I'm going to turn my work to the new row. This is the first loop of my blanket, in which I'm going to take through the next 2 loops of the yarn. So grab the next 2 loops of the yarn and take them through the first loop of your blanket. Now put your hook in the next loop of your blanket and the next loop from the yarn and take it through. The next loop of your blanket and grab the next loop from the yarn. Grab the next loop from your blanket and the next loop from the yarn. Grab the next loop from your blanket and the next loop from your yarn, and finish the row by working an increase in the end loop of your work. So in the last loop, grab the next 2 loops from your yarn and take them through the loop of your blanket. So in this row, we should have 2 extra loops than the previous one. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 loops. Okay, now we're going to start the new row in which we're going to have 10 loops, and it's going to be the last row that we're going to work together. So turn your work, and this right here is the first loop of my blanket, and if you're not sure, either use a stitch marker or count your stitches. If I start here, I should have 8 loops. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So this is the first one. And grab the first 2 loops of your yarn. First one and the second one. And take them through the first loop of your blanket. Okay. Now keep working. Put your hook in the next loop of your blanket and grab the next loop from your yarn. The next loop from your blanket and the next loop from your yarn. The next loop from your blanket and the next loop from the yarn. Next loop on your blanket and the next loop on your yarn. The next loop from your blanket and the next loop from your yarn. Grab the next loop from your blanket and the next one from the yarn. Put your hook now in the last loop on your blanket and grab the next 2 loops from the yarn. 1, 2, and take them through the last loop of your blanket. So in this row now, I should have a total of 10 loops. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. Okay, so this is the corner, and this is how our blanket has started to form. Now this is the one side, and this is the other. So I'm going to keep working increases up until both sides measure 100 centimeters. That's about 40 inches because we're working a crib size blanket. Once I reach the 100 centimeters, I'm going to turn my video back on to see how we're going to keep working the blanket, because it's going to be a rectangular one. So this means that on the one side we're going to start working decreases, and on the other side we're going to keep working increases up until the length becomes 120 centimeters. Okay, once I have reached on the total width that I need for the rectangular blanket, then I'm going to keep working decreases on both sides to close it up. So keep working increases on both sides up until you reach 100 centimeters. Once I reach that point, I'm going to turn my video back on to see how to start working the decreases. I have completed crocheting the total width that I need for my blanket. At this point, my total loops are 94. If you count all your loops, you will have 94. Okay, I have 1 meter length, 1 meter width and 1 meter length at this point. Now, because I want to create a rectangular blanket, on the one side I'm going to be working decreases, okay, and on the other side I'm always going to be working increases. Now let's see how our blanket looks like from the bottom going to the top. Okay, and because on this side I am always going to be working decreases, I'm going to put my stitch markers so I know that every time I bring myself back on this side I'm going to be working decreases. Now, because I'm going to be working decreases on this side, the blanket is going to start closing up, so I'm going to start having a straight side over here, as I have on this other side over here as well. Okay, so the blanket is going to start closing up, so this right here is going to be the width of the blanket. And on this side, on the other side over here, I'm going to keep working increases up until my blanket, this side over here, measures 120 centimeters, which is 1 meter and 20 centimeters. Okay, so every time I come back here, which is the side without the stitch marker, I am always going to be working increases, so I'm always going to be adding loops. And on the side that I have my stitch marker, I am always going to be working decreases, which means I'm going to be subtracting loops. The end of the previous row, the row that I just completed, they gave me the 94 loops. Okay, the end of the row was an increase, as all of the rows were so far increase in the beginning and the end of the row. Now I want to start the new row, and I'm going to start the new row by keeping the blanket in the same direction, and then I'm going to turn my work. Okay, so when I want to decrease loops, I'm going to put my hook in the last 2 loops of my blanket. I'm going to grab a new loop from my yarn, and I'm going to take it through the 2 loops that I had on my hook. Okay, and now this is the beginning of the new row, and I'm going to turn my work. Okay, and put your hook in the next loop of the blanket, take a new loop from the yarn and pull it through. Next loop from your blanket, new loop from the yarn and pull it through. Next loop from your blanket, new loop from the yarn and pull it through. And keep pulling 1 loop through each loop of your blanket up until we reach the end of the row, in which I'm going to turn my video back on, because we are going to work an increase over here, because it's the side where we are always going to be working an increase. I have reached the end of my blanket, and after my decrease I have taken 1 loop through each loop of the blanket. Now in the last loop of my blanket, because this is the side that I'm going to keep working my increases, I'm going to put my hook in the loop from the blanket, and I'm going to grab 2 new loops from the yarn, and I'm going to take them through to finish the row with. Now, as long as I keep working decreases on the one side and increases on the other side, my loops are always going to be 94 now. Okay, and then once I reach the total length that I need, and I'm going to be working decreases on both sides, I'm going to start decreasing from 96 to 94, 92, 90, 88, and so on. Okay, so as long as I work decrease on the one side and increase on the other, my loops are always going to be 94. Now I've completed my row with an increase. I took 2 loops through the last loop, and because this is the side of increases, I'm going to start the new row on this side with an increase as well. So put your hook in the last loop of the blanket and grab 2 new loops from the yarn and take them through the loop. Now this is the first stitch, which is an increase of the new row. Now I'm going to turn my blanket, and I'm going to put my hook in the second stitch from the blanket, and I'm going to grab a new loop from the yarn. Third loop from the blanket, grab a new loop from the yarn. Okay? So keep taking 1 loop through every loop, and once I reach the end, I'm going to turn my video back on, because we are reaching the side with the decreases. So in the end of this row, we're going to stitch together those 2 last loops of the row. I have reached the end of my row, where I have 2 loops left, which I'm going to close together to form a decrease, because I'm on the side with my stitch marker. Now, every time that we work a decrease in the new row, we work a decrease as well, because I still am on the side with the stitch marker when I begin my row. Okay, so always end and begin the row with a decrease. So I'm going to put my hook in the last 2 loops of the blanket. I'm going to take a new loop from the yarn, and I'm going to close those 2 loops together. Now I'm going to start my new row, where again I'm going to start the new row from this side. I'm not going to turn my work, I'm going to keep on this side, and I'm going to put my hook in the last 2 loops of the blanket again, which when you turn your work, they are the first 2 loops of the row. So put your hook through those last 2 loops of the blanket and grab a new loop from the yarn, and again close those 2 loops together to form a decrease again. Now turn your blanket. This was the first stitch of the row, the one that we just worked. Now put your hook in every loop, and I'm gonna grab a new loop from the yarn, and I'm gonna take it through each loop from the blanket. Okay, loop from the yarn through the loop of the blanket. So see how we have a nice corner over here and how it has started to get straight on this side. Okay, so keep taking 1 loop through every loop, and once I reach here the end, the last stitch is going to be an increase, and the new stitch of the new row is going to be an increase as well. I have reached the end of my blanket. Okay, I'm left with the last loop in which I'm going to work an increase. I'm going to take 2 new loops from the yarn, and I'm going to take them through the last loop of the row. Now I'm going to start the new row in the same side of the blanket, and by starting the new row, I'm going to put my hook in the last loop of the blanket, and again I'm going to work an increase, and this is the first stitch of the new row. Okay, the increase. Now from the loop after that, we take 1 loop through every loop, and because we're going to work off camera, I'm going to give a quick explanation what we're doing so far. Okay, so 1 loop in every loop, and now once you reach the end of this row, it's the side of the decreases. Okay, we're going to take the last 2 loops of the row, and we're going to close them together, and then we're going to start the new row on the same side of the blanket, in which I'm going to grab again the last 2 loops of the blanket, which they really are the first 2 loops of the new row, and I'm going to work a decrease again. Okay, and this is the new row that we're starting, and then you're going to take again, after the decrease, 1 loop through every loop, and then on the side of the increase again, you're going to work 2 loops in the last loop to finish the row with, and 2 loops again in the last loop, which is the first loop of the new row. Okay, so as we work 2 increases back to back on the one side, we work 2 decreases back to back on the other side as well. The 1 increase is the end of the row. The second increase is the new stitch of the new row. As the same applies on this side as well. The first decrease is the end of the row. The second decrease is a new stitch of the new row. So keep working off camera, and once the side in which I work my increases, once this side, the total length measures 120 centimeters, I'm going to turn my video back on to see how from that point on we're going to be working decreases on both sides up until we have a perfect rectangle. I have reached my blanket at 120 centimeters. Okay, and if you measure this small part over here, this is where the blanket has started to go up to straighten up the edge over here from the decreases that we were working on this side. Now if you measure this side, you'll see that it's 20 centimeters. So if I have given 20 centimeters of length on this side, this means that I have given an extra 20 centimeters length of this side, so the 100 centimeters that I had before I started working the decreases, now I have the total 120 that I need. From now on, we're going to start working decreases on both sides. We're not going to work any more increases, okay? And this is how my blanket looks like at this point, starting from the bottom, going to the top, okay, going to the top, and this is where I was always working the increases up until now. Now from here on, I have worked the first decrease to finish my row with. Now I'm going to work one more decrease, which is the beginning of the new row. I'm going to turn my work. I'm going to work one loop through every loop. And now in the end of the row over here, I'm going to work decreases as well. So I'm going to work together the last two loops of the blanket, which is the end of the row. And then I'm going to work the last two loops again, which is going to be the beginning of the new row. Okay, so what we are really doing is we're working two decreases back to back on each side. The one decrease is the end of the row, and the second decrease is the beginning of the new row. Once you work your second decrease, again turn your work one loop in every loop, and when you reach the end, again you're going to work two decreases back to back. The one is going to be the end of the row, and the second is going to be the beginning of the new row, and so on. So from here on, in every row, you're going to decrease by two loops. So if we had a total of 94 loops at this point, up until this point, sorry, the 94 in this row are going to become 92, then 90, 88, 86, 84, and so on. Once I reach my project to be at 4 loops, when I'm almost done, okay, when I have only 4 loops left, I'm going to turn my video back on to see how to finish the blanket together. So what we're really doing at this point, since we're working decreases on both sides, this side, which is the length, it's going to keep going upwards up until it reaches 120 as well. And here, since I'm going to start working decreases on this side as well, it's going to start closing this way to give the width on the top part of the blanket as well. Okay, so keep working decreases now on both ends of the blanket, no more increases up until you're left with 4 loops, where I'm going to turn my video back on to see how to finish the blanket together. Okay, as I mentioned before, I turned my video off. Then I will turn it back on when I'm left with only 4 loops, okay? So I have 4 loops. I have worked my decrease in the end of this row, so I have already worked together 2 loops. Now I'm going to start the new row, so I'm going to grab the last 2 loops of my row, and I'm going to take a new loop from the yarn and take it through those 2 loops. I'm going to turn the blanket, okay, and grab those remaining 2 loops, and I'm going to take a new loop from the yarn and I'm going to take it through to close them together. And then those 2 are the last 2 loops of my blanket. So I'm going to take a new loop from the yarn and I'm going to close together the last 2 loops, okay? Now, in order to close your project, see how here I have the loop? So you're going to cut the yarn right over here and you're going to pull the loop to open up. You're going to make a knot over here and then you're going to weave in the end right here on the back side, right here on the loops of your blanket. Okay, so this is how to work a corner to corner blanket using the Alize Puffy Fine Ombre Batik yarn. Thanks for watching. Please subscribe, and if you like the video, please press like and leave a comment. Thanks again. Bye bye.